Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you believe about the world, about God, the soul, science, good and evil, is just a shadow cast by something infinitely deeper. That behind the official story, religion, politics, and even reason itself, there's a secret current of knowledge that has always guided humanity in silence. An ancient flame some called high magic. Few dared to touch it. Fewer still survived the transformation it brings. But what if I told you that flame never went out, and that some believe it still burns quietly, right before our eyes? And you? Have you ever had the feeling there's something beyond what we were taught, a truth that hums behind appearances? I want to know if you felt that silent calling. Leave a comment telling me what led you to seek hidden knowledge. Personally, I pursue knowledge out of a need for meaning, to feel that something is pulsing and vibrating beyond the flesh. A need to understand existence, what lies beyond appearances. My path in magic is to connect with God, with nature, and with the universe. What made a future priest abandon the altar and plunge into the depths of Kabbalah, alchemy, and tarot? What did he find in the shadows that led him to challenge both the church and the scientific materialism of the 19th century? And why are his words still studied today in Masonic temples, Hermetic orders, and secret societies? What he discovered would never let him sleep in peace again. After that, he devoted every day of his life to his purpose. They say Levi didn't just study the occult, he deciphered it. And in doing so, he revealed something the world wasn't ready to hear: the existence of a universal secret doctrine hidden beneath the veil of religions, symbols, and mythologies. A truth that could unite faith and reason, science and spirituality, but also destroy the power of those who live off deceit and ignorance. Do you believe there is a universal secret doctrine concealed beneath the symbols of all religions? Tell me in the comments what you think Levi actually discovered. This is the story of a man who dared to cross the boundary between the visible and the invisible. Of an initiate who believed magic wasn't superstition, but the supreme spiritual science. And that the human will, when purified and disciplined, could move the very foundations of the universe. If you think you know the history of the occult, get ready, because this video will make you question everything you know about magic, secret societies, spirituality, and religion. But among all his revelations, one stands out as the most powerful and dangerous: the idea that the human will, when trained, can manipulate energies and control an invisible force Levi called the astral light. And it was the discovery of this force that put him on a direct collision course with the church, led to his being imprisoned twice, and ultimately to his mysterious death, which we'll unravel at the end. But before we continue our story, let me introduce myself. I'm Gabriel Alexandre, and welcome to Esoterica Mind Portal, your portal to ancestral knowledge. Every video on this channel is a reminder of your own soul. Subscribe now and hit the bell to join our community. Please drop a like to support our work and share this video on social media, in groups, and with friends. This video was suggested by Robert Miller. If you want an exclusive video, comment below what topic you want to see next. The comment with the most likes will win. Now, back to it. Our story begins in Paris on February 8, 1810. In a humble family in the narrow back streets of the French capital, a boy was born who would forever change the fate of Western occultism: Alphonse Louis Constant, the son of a simple shoemaker named Jean-Joseph Constant and Jeanne-Agnès Beaucourt, a devout and intelligent woman. This boy carried a destiny even his parents couldn't imagine. But there's something you need to know right from the start, something few. Notice when they begin studying this extraordinary man. The story of Eliphas Levi isn't just a biography of an occultist. It's the story of how a man crossed the abyss between two worlds, carrying with him the flames of an ancestral knowledge that was about to be snuffed out forever by the darkness of materialism that was beginning to dominate the 19th century. From childhood, Alphonse showed a remarkable talent for drawing his hands conjured forms and symbols with an ease that impressed everyone around him. But his parents, especially his devout mother, had other plans. Poverty didn't allow for paid formal education, so they saw the church as an opportunity. At 15 in 1825, young Alphonse entered the Saint-Nicolas du Chardonnay Seminary to complete his classical studies. There, separated from the family life he knew, he plunged into a world of Latin, Greek, and theology. At 20, he was transferred to the Issy Seminary to study philosophy, and at 22, in 1832, he entered the prestigious Saint-Sulpice Seminary. It was there, in the shadows of those ancient libraries, that something began to stir. While studying to become a priest, Alphonse learned Hebrew, and it was precisely in the Hebrew alphabet that he would later find the keys to decipher the mysteries of Kabbalah. At 23, he became a subdeacon, responsible for children's catechism. At 25, on December 19, 1835, he was ordained a deacon, making solemn vows of chastity and obedience. The path to the priesthood was open. Only 1 week remained. A single week until Alphonse Louis Constant would become a priest and follow the life that seemed already written for him. But destiny had other plans, and it was love that changed everything. What seemed like a simple tale of forbidden love would become the beginning of the deepest initiation of his life. During his catechism classes, the young deacon had fallen in love with one of his students. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was something deeper, something that made him question everything he'd been taught to believe. In 1836, at 26, a week before his ordination as a priest, Alphonse confessed to his superiors that he loved a woman and could no longer follow the priestly path. The reaction was devastating. His superiors were horrified. According to some sources, his mother, who already suffered from severe depression, committed suicide shortly after Levi gave up becoming a priest. It's worth remembering that in France at that time, many mothers pinned their hopes on a son's social ascent through the priesthood. And Alphonse, now alone, had to face a lay life for which he wasn't prepared, still wearing the clerical cassock he wouldn't abandon. For years, a ghost caught between two worlds. Imagine a 26-year-old giving up the dream of his life and losing his mother. Anyone else might have given up, but Eliphas Levi felt there was a higher purpose in his life. And here's something most people don't realize when they study this man's life. That rupture, that decision to follow the heart instead of tradition, wasn't just a personal choice. It was the first step on a journey that would lead him to discover that true priesthood wasn't within church walls, but in the invisible temples of the human soul, in the secret sanctuaries where the ancient mysteries still lived. Alphonse began working as a tutor in Paris to survive. Poverty haunted him. At 28 in 1838, he met the mystic Simon Ganneau, a peculiar and controversial man who believed himself the reincarnation of Louis XVI, and whose wife considered herself the reincarnation of Marie Antoinette. Ganneau practiced magic and witchcraft, and it was there, in that seemingly chance encounter, that Alphonse began to wade into the deep waters of the occult. It was also during this period, probably through Ganneau, that Alphonse met Flora Tristan, one of the most notable figures of French socialism. Before dedicating himself entirely to the occult, Levi was a radical socialist and political activist. Flora was a renowned writer and feminist activist who fought for the International Union of Workers. The two shared radical ideas about esoteric Christianity and social justice. When Flora died prematurely in 1844 at 41, it was Alphonse who completed and published her unfinished final work, L'Émancipation de la Femme, The Emancipation of Woman. which also established Levi as an activist who fought for women's rights at a time when women couldn't even vote. But he hadn't yet completely abandoned his Christian beliefs. On the contrary, he tried to reconcile them with the revolutionary ideas beginning to boil over in France. At 29, he published Des Moeurs et des Doctrines du Rationalisme en France, a work on rationalism. He tried monastic life again, entering the Benedictine monastery of Solesmes, but couldn't keep the discipline and abandoned that path as well. At 30, in 1840, he published L'Évangile du Peuple, the Gospel of the People, a radical treatise advocating Christian socialist ideas. The following year, at 31, he published La Bible de la Liberté, the Bible of Liberty, a work that led to his arrest. The French authorities would not tolerate it. Alphonse was imprisoned for 8 months and fined for attacking public and religious morality. But what he found inside prison was something no book or temple could teach. In prison, he read Swedenborg, the Swedish visionary whose works on the spiritual worlds would profoundly influence his future thought. Between 1841 and 1850, Alphonse lived through years of obsessive seeking. While working as a tutor, he spent nights in libraries devouring texts: Greek Hermeticism, Jewish Kabbalah, medieval alchemy, Rosicrucian manifestos, Masonic rituals. He moved in Simon Ganot's circles, learning practical magic. He walked alongside Flora Tristan, understanding that spirituality and human liberation were inseparable. He studied animal, magnetism, and theories of universal fluids. Each tradition remained separate and incomplete puzzle. But unlike the occultists of his day, who mastered a single tradition, Alphonse absorbed all these currents. When 1850 arrived, when crisis forced him to dive within himself, that moment of illumination wasn't accidental. It was the result of 20 years of obsessive preparation. In that instant, like an alchemist who finds the formula, all the fragmented traditions unified. Kabbalah, Tarot, Hermeticism, alchemy, Christianity. They weren't different paths, but chapters of the same ancestral story. There was a perennial doctrine flowing through the centuries in symbols, rituals, and mystical traditions. And it was this synthesis that allowed him years later to create his most controversial and powerful symbol, Baphomet. A symbol that only makes sense when we understand this union of opposites he discovered in prison. When he left prison, Alphonse was a different man. At 34, in 1844, he published La Mère de Dieu, the Mother of God, and finally gave up the clerical garb he still insisted on wearing. But his personal life was about to become even more complicated. At 36, in 1846, something happened that would mark his path forever. Alphonse was engaged to Eugénie Chenevier, a woman with whom he had a serious relationship. She was pregnant with his child. At the same time, Alphonse was having an affair with one of Eugénie's students, a young woman named Marie-Noémie Cadillot. 17 years old, her exact age is disputed to this day. When Noémie ran away from home to be with him, the girl's father gave Alphonse a brutal ultimatum: either marry Noémie or be charged with statutory rape. Alphonse chose marriage, abandoning Eugénie and the child she was expecting. The civil ceremony took place in July 1846. Noémie's family refused to provide a dowry. The wedding dinner was just potatoes. And that same year, in September, Alphonse's illegitimate son with Eugénie was born, but he never acknowledged him. The marriage to Noémie was a disaster from the start. They had stillborn twins and a daughter named Marie who would die at 7. None of their children survived to adulthood. That same year, 1846, Alphonse published La Voix de la Famine, The Voice of Famine, another radical pamphlet that again landed him in prison, this time sentenced to a year, reduced to 6 months. In 1848, Alphonse published Le Testament de la Liberté, a manifesto advocating the emancipation of the poor freedom of conscience and equality between the sexes, and the rehabilitation of Lucifer as a symbol of freedom and rebellion against oppression. For him, true freedom was spiritual, freeing oneself from the ignorance that prevents us from recognizing our divine nature. Published at the height of the 1848 French Revolution, the work would mark his transition from revolutionary socialist to the legendary Magus Eliphas Levi, who would understand that the true revolution was inner, magical. His life was a litany of failures, prisons, poverty, and suffering. But something was about to happen that would change everything. In 1850 at 40, Alphonse Louis Constant went through what can only be described as a dark night of the soul, a financial and spiritual crisis so deep it forced him to look within and find something that had been waiting there all along. And at that moment, at that crossroads between despair and illumination, Alphonse Louis Constant died, and Eliphas Levi, the Kabbalistic Magus, was born. The name Eliphas Levi Zahed was the Hebrew transliteration of Alphonse Louis. It was as if he were declaring to the world that he was no longer the failed deacon, the imprisoned socialist, the unhappy husband. He was now an initiate into the ancient mysteries, a Magus, a Kabbalist, a guardian of secret traditions. Between 1850 and 1853, Levi began giving private lessons in occultism, charging up to 25 francs per consultation, which was a considerable sum at the time. Students came to him seeking knowledge of Kabbalah, ceremonial magic, alchemy, and the secrets of Hermetic traditions. But there was something different about Levi. He wasn't just another charlatan peddling illusions. Levi had a unique vision, a brilliant synthesis that connected esoteric Christianity with Jewish Kabbalah, Egyptian Hermeticism with Greek philosophy, medieval alchemy with the animal magnetism being debated in his day, despite creating a complete system of initiation into the mysteries. Eliphas Levi remained fundamentally self-taught, learning from members of secret societies, occultist friends, and self-directed study and practice. His only documented formal initiation was into Freemasonry at the Grand Orient de France on March 14, 1861, at the Rose du Parfait Silence Lodge. But even that brief Masonic experience lasted only 5 months. Some sources say he got annoyed after being interrupted and arguing with a Masonic master while giving a lecture in a lodge. He tried to show the brethren that all of Freemasonry was essentially an expression of Kabbalah, that the Masonic degrees corresponded to the Sephirot of the Tree of Life, that the temple itself was a reflection of the heavenly Jerusalem. But he met incomprehension and rejection. The French Freemasons of the time weren't interested in the mystical depths Levi tried to reveal. For them, Freemasonry had become primarily a political and anti-clerical organization. Levi rejected modern Masonry as corrupted, having lost the true meaning of its symbols. For him, true initiation wasn't a ritual conferred by an external organization, but an inner spiritual transformation achieved through deep study, magical discipline, and relentless dedication to the ancient mysteries. Even without being initiated into orders, Levi influenced every subsequent order and secret society. His teachings were ridiculed at the time, but nowadays many scholars draw direct lines between Freemasonry and Kabbalah and the Tree of Life knowledge accepted by many of the mystery schools. And then, in 1854, at 44, something extraordinary happened. Levi traveled to London and met Edward Bulwer Lytton, the famous English novelist and author of occult works like Zanoni. Bulwer Lytton was the head of a small Rosicrucian order and was deeply interested in the occult as a literary theme. The two men connected immediately, and together, in that mist-shrouded, mysterious Victorian London, they carried out something that would enter the annals of occult history. They performed the magical evocation of Apollonius of Tyana, the Neo-Pythagorean magus of the 1st century. whom many considered as powerful as Christ. What happened during that evocation, Levi never fully revealed, but something in him changed after that ritual. What occurred that night in London, to this day, divides scholars and magi around the world. That same year, 1854, tragedy struck again. His daughter Marie died at 7. She was the last tie that still bound him to Noémie. The marriage, already ruined for years, ended for good. Noémie would go her own way, becoming a successful sculptor working on famous monuments like the Fontaine Saint-Michel in Paris, and a prolific writer under the pen name Claude Vignon. She would marry again, this time to a politician who would become Prime Minister of France. But that would happen much later. In 1865, 11 years after their separation, the marriage was finally annulled on the grounds that Alphonse's earlier vows as a deacon had not been properly revoked. But let's go back to 1855. Freed from the shackles of a failed marriage and propelled by the transformative experience in London, Lévy began writing his masterpiece, Dogme et rituel de la haute magie dogma, and Ritual of High Magic. The work was published in 2 volumes, the Dogma in 1854 and the Ritual in 1856. And here's what makes this book truly revolutionary. Lévy structured it in 22 chapters, each corresponding to one of the 22 major arcana of the tarot and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. He was the first to make that systematic connection. Before him, there were vague speculations about a relationship between tarot and Kabbalah, but it was Lévy who created the system that every later occultist would follow or attempt to reformulate. And have you ever felt that certain symbols seem to repeat across different traditions? That what appears in the tarot echoes in sacred texts, in art, or even in dreams? Comment if you've noticed these coincidences, or better yet, synchronicities. The opening lines of Dogma and Ritual are unforgettable and capture perfectly the spirit of the entire work. Behind the veil of all the hieratic and mystical allegories of ancient doctrines, behind the darkness and the strange trials of all initiations, under the seal of all sacred scriptures, in the ruins of Nineveh or Thebes, in the crumbling stones of ancient temples, and in the blackened face of the Assyrian or Egyptian Sphinx, in the monstrous or marvelous paintings that explain sacred emblems to the faithful of India, in the cryptographic hieroglyphs of our old alchemical books, in the ceremonies prescribed for magical reception, in the disciplines of the ancient and modern symbolism of Freemasonry, we find the traces of one and the same doctrine, which is everywhere the same and everywhere carefully hidden. This was Lévy's vision. There was a universal secret doctrine, a perennial philosophy preserved through the centuries in symbols, rituals, and mystical traditions. And the key to understanding all of this was in Kabbalah, tarot, and high magic. But what did Lévy mean by high magic? For him, magic wasn't superstition or stage tricks. It was a transcendental science, a form of knowledge that stood between religion and science, reconciling faith and reason. Lévy believed magic could be the missing link that would once again unite modern man, fragmented by materialism and extreme rationalism, with the spiritual truths of the ancient traditions. The perennial philosophy became a foundational concept in modern times, directly influencing theosophy and secret societies such as Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, the Golden Dawn, and the Astrum Argentum, AA. The central concept of all Lévy's magic was the astral light. This was a term he developed extensively, inspired by Mesmer's theories of animal magnetism and the era's ideas about universal fluids. The astral light, according to Lévy, is a universal agent, a subtle substance that permeates all things. It is both material and spiritual, a universal plastic mediator, a common receptacle of the vibrations of movement and the images of forms. It can be compared to nature's imagination. This astral light is the vehicle of life, the mediator between spirit and matter. And here lies the secret of magic. The one who learns to control the astral light through their will, the one who can magnetize, direct, and shape this universal fluid that is the true magus. Levi's astral light, by consensus among students of esoteric traditions, can be seen as a functional analog to concepts like prana, India, and Qi, China, a subtle vital medium that circulates and connects body and mind. It also approaches Akasha as an informational ether where forms and images subsist, and echoes Reichenbach's Odd, a magnetic fluid that mediates influences. On the psychological plane, it recalls Jung's collective unconscious, the symbolic reservoir that conditions perception. They differ, however, in emphasis. Levi ties it above all to trained will, capable of shaping this plastic medium. Taken as a bridge between prana, ki, and akasha, it is a field, not a physical ether, but plastic to the will. But before we talk about will, if you're enjoying this video, remember to hit like right now and comment with the phrase, "I want a continuation of this video." That way I'll know you liked it, and I'll make another video on this topic, the will. This is another fundamental concept in Levi. Not common will, capricious and inconstant, but will with a capital W. Will that is trained, educated, and strengthened through spiritual discipline and knowledge. Levi taught that every intelligent effort of the will is a projection of human light or fluid. When this will becomes lucid, it can act upon the mass of the astral light, and with the help of other wills it absorbs and encourages. Establish powerful and irresistible currents. It is through trained will that the magus controls the elements, influences minds, heals diseases, or, if he uses his power improperly, can cause harm and imbalance. But Levi always emphasized that magic must be practiced with wisdom and justice. To magnetize without danger, he said, it's essential to have the light of life within oneself, that is, one must be wise and just. A man enslaved by his passions, dominated by his vices, who seeks magical power for selfish reasons, such a man will only be summoning demons and becoming a slave to the astral light instead of its master. It was in 1856, in the Ritual of High Magic, that Levi included his most famous and controversial drawing, Baphomet, a figure with a goat's head, wings, both female and male breasts, a blazing torch between the horns, a pentagram on the forehead, one arm pointing up with the word solve, and the other pointing down with the word coagula, and between the legs a caduceus, representing vital force. This symbol, so often misinterpreted today as satanic, was for Levi the perfect representation of the magical absolute, the reconciliation of all opposites, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, light and darkness, good and evil, everything united in a transcendent synthesis. Levi's Baphomet is androgynous because ultimate reality lies beyond dualities. The wings represent the volatile, the scales on the body represent water, the torch between the horns is magical, intelligence, the pentagram is light, and the dominion of spirit over the elements. Solve et coagula dissolve, and coagulate are the fundamental alchemical processes, the destruction of old forms and the creation of new ones, death and rebirth, the perpetual transformation that is the essence of life and initiation. The figure fits perfectly onto the Kabbalistic tree of life, linking all the Sephirot of the tree. Also functioning as a symbol of spiritual illumination, the human being who has integrated the animal and the divine, androgynous in essence. Now tell me, what does the symbol of Baphomet represent to you? Light, darkness, or balance? I want to see your interpretation in the comments. There's no right or wrong answer, only levels of understanding. In 1860, at 50, Levi published his second great work, Histoire de la Magie, History of Magic. If dogma and ritual had established the theoretical and practical principles of high magic, History of Magic traced the development of this tradition from the earliest times up to Levi's day. He examined the magic of the Persian Magi, the Hermetic magic of the Egyptians, Hebrew Kabbalah, the mathematical magic of Pythagoras, the Greek mysteries, Gnosticism, medieval alchemy, the Rosicrucians, the Templars, and much more. For Levi, these were different chapters of the same story, diverse manifestations of the same secret doctrine preserved through the ages. The publication of History of Magic coincided with an important political moment in France. In 1860, there was an amnesty that allowed greater freedom to former socialists and revolutionaries like Levi. He had learned to be cautious after his earlier imprisonments, but now he could express his ideas with less fear of persecution. The following year, in 1861, at 51, Levi published La Clef des Grands Mystères, the Key of the Great Mysteries. This work was, in a sense, a sequel to Dogma and Ritual, deepening and expanding the earlier teachings. In it, Levi explored profound philosophical and theological questions, always trying to reconcile occultism with Christianity, science with religion, reason with faith. That same year, Levi returned to London for a second meeting with Edward Bulwer Lytton. The two men shared knowledge, practiced rituals, and continued developing their ideas about magic and initiation. It was an intellectual and spiritual friendship that enriched both. In 1862, at 52, Levi published Fables et Symboles, Fables and Symbols, a collection of allegorical stories and symbolic analyses. 3 years later, in 1865, at 55, he published La Science des Esprits, the Science of Spirits, where he examined mediumistic and spiritualist phenomena that were in vogue at the time. Levi was extremely critical of popular spiritualism, which he considered superstition and charlatanism. For him, invoking spirits without proper knowledge was extremely dangerous, as it exposed the practitioner to the erratic influences of the astral, light, and of lower entities. In 1868, at 58, Levi wrote what would be his last great work, Le Grand Arcane, ou l'Occultisme dévoilé, the Great Arcane, or Occultism Unveiled. But this work would only be published posthumously in 1898, more than 20 years after his death. During his final years, Levi kept teaching privately, writing and refining his ideas. His influence was beginning to spread. In Paris and London, circles of occultists were studying his works. Some admired him deeply. Others criticized him for his apparent contradictions. Because Levi had a peculiar trait, he could see both sides of every question, and that sometimes made his statements seem contradictory. On the one hand, he championed magic and the occult as humanity's true spiritual tradition. On the other, he remained deeply tied to Catholicism, and often wrote in a way that seemed to submit magic to the authority of the Church. Some scholars believe this was a strategy to avoid persecution. Others think it reflected a genuine inner struggle between his Catholic upbringing and his occult convictions. Still others suggest that Levi was trying to show that true esoteric Catholicism and true high magic were, at heart, the same thing, both paths to the same transcendent truth. What we do know is that Levi never completely abandoned his identity as a Christian, even when he was most deeply involved with magical practices. And then we arrive at 1875. Eliphas Levi, now 65, felt the weight of time and of the path he had chosen, a life devoted to seeking light through the shadows of mystery. In his last months, his health declined rapidly. He spent long hours in silence, surrounded by books, lit candles, and the symbols that would accompany him to his final breath. On May 31st, in his modest room in Paris, Levi left the physical world. He died peacefully, they say, like someone simply passing through a veil, conscious, calm, almost in meditation. The circumstances of his death, however, soon became a matter of controversy. There are reports that he called a priest to receive the last sacraments, reconciling with the church he once left. But no proof of that was ever found. No priest's name was recorded. No Catholic paper celebrated the return of the former abbot. And curiously, Levi was buried in the secular cemetery of Ivry, not in consecrated ground. For many scholars, that detail speaks louder than any rumor. Levi departed faithful to his own faith, a faith that united the inner Christ of Kabbalah with the God of the mystics, and not with Rome's dogma. Those who knew him say that, in his final days, he spoke of reconciliation not with the church, but with the universe itself. The light I sought outside had always been within me, he is said to have told a friend. Words that sound like the confession of a man who finally understood what he had always sought to decipher. Eliphas Levi died as he lived, between the visible and the invisible, between the altar and the secret temple of the heart. His death remains wrapped in silence, the same silence he called the first of the mysteries. But his influence never ceased, because when Levi departed, he did not take with him the flame of modern occultism. On the contrary, he left it burning, and from it, all the lights that came after were kindled. In 1888, 13 years after his death, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was founded in London. This organization, which would become the most influential magical order in the English-speaking world, based much of its teachings and rituals on Levi's works. The founders of the Golden Dawn, William Wynne Westcott and Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, were deep students of Levi. They took his system of correspondences between tarot, Kabbalah, and Hebrew letters, and expanded it, though they made some controversial changes. Levi had associated the Fool, the tarot's 0 card, with the Hebrew letter Shin, placing it at the end of the sequence. The Golden Dawn moved the Fool to the beginning, associating it with the letter Aleph. This change sparked debates that continue to this day among tarot readers and Kabbalists. The Golden Dawn attracted some of the brightest names of the Victorian and Edwardian eras. The poet William Butler Yeats was a member. The actress Florence Farr was one of its leaders. And then there was Aleister Crowley. Crowley joined the Golden Dawn in 1898 and rose quickly in rank, but his controversial personality and relentless pursuit of magical power eventually led to his expulsion. Crowley would go his own way, founding his own magical religion called Thelema, and writing prolifically about occultism. And here's a fascinating detail that ties it all together. Aleister Crowley was born in October 1875, the same year Eliphas Levi died in May. Aware of this coincidence, Crowley came to believe and publicly claim that he was the reincarnation of Eliphas Levi. He saw himself as Levi's direct successor and the continuation of Levi's work. Crowley's claim is, of course, impossible to verify, and many see it as one more of his grandiose self-promotions. But symbolically, there's some truth in it. Crowley did take Levi's work and carry it in new directions, further developing the concepts of true will, sex magic, and the use of tarot in magical practice. Crowley's concept of Thelema, summed up in the phrase, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," clearly echoes Levi's teachings on the supremacy of trained will. But it wasn't only the Golden Dawn and Crowley who were influenced by Levi. Across the Atlantic, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, also studied Levi's works in depth. In her own monumental writings, Isis Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky cited Levi extensively, though at times critically. She called him the most erudite, if not the greatest, of modern Kabbalists, but also criticized his apparent contradictions. Arthur Edward Waite, the British occultist, who created the famous Rider-Waite tarot deck with artist Pamela Colman Smith, was the English translator of several of Levi's works. Waite translated Dogme et Rituel de la Haute Magie as transcendental magic, its doctrine and ritual, as well as history of magic and other works. Through Waite's translations, Levi became accessible to the English-speaking world, and his influence spread even further. The Rider-Waite deck, published in 1909 and still the most popular tarot deck in the world today, incorporates many of the symbolic ideas Levi had developed, including rich Kabbalistic and Hermetic imagery. The French occultist Pappus, real name Gérard Ancos, was another follower of Levi's ideas. Pappus co-founded the Martinist order and wrote extensively on tarot, Kabbalah, and magic. His work, The Tarot of the Bohemians, is deeply influenced by Levi's synthesis. The Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, another major magical order founded in the early 20th century and later led by Aleister Crowley, also incorporated Levian teachings into its system. And so, through these organizations and individuals, Eliphas Levi's ideas spread throughout the Western world, forming the foundation of what we now call modern occultism, or the Western Hermetic tradition. But what makes Levi so special? Why did his works have such a lasting impact? The answer lies in the unique syntheses he created. Before Levi, esoteric knowledge was fragmented. There was Jewish Kabbalah, but it was inaccessible to most non-Jews. There was alchemy, but its texts were intentionally obscure and symbolic. There was tarot, but it was seen primarily as a card game or a fortune-telling tool without deep theoretical grounding. There was animal magnetism and theories about universal fluids, but these were treated as purely physical phenomena. There was the esoteric Christianity of the Gnostics and mystics, but it had been suppressed by the Orthodox Church. There was Egyptian Hermeticism, but it was wrapped in layers of speculation and pseudo-history. Levi took all those loose threads and wove them into a coherent tapestry. He showed how Kabbalah, tarot, alchemy, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and even esoteric Christianity were all part of a single tradition, the perennial philosophy that had been preserved through the centuries. He provided a practical system of correspondences that allowed students to navigate this vast ocean of symbols and teachings. And he did all this in a language that, though poetic, and at times enigmatic, was more accessible than the medieval and Renaissance texts that preceded it. But there's another reason Levi remains relevant. He understood something many occultists of his day, and even later, failed to grasp. He knew that magic wasn't just about acquiring supernatural powers or manipulating invisible forces. True magic was about inner transformation, about the great work of alchemy that transmutes the lead of ordinary consciousness into the gold of spiritual illumination. Levi taught that the ultimate goal of magic is the emancipation of the will, the liberation of the soul from the chains of ignorance, fear, and disordered passions. The true magus isn't the one who dazzles others with extraordinary phenomena, but the one who has conquered himself, who has harmonized his will with the divine will, becoming a conscious channel for the light that flows from the primordial source. Levi's vision was deeply spiritual and ethical. He always warned against the selfish use of magic, against the pursuit of power for its own sake. Black magic, he taught, isn't a different kind of magic. It's simply the perverted use of the same knowledge and the same forces. The black magician is the one who uses his knowledge to dominate others, to satisfy selfish desires, to feed his pride. Such a magician will inevitably become a slave to the forces he thinks he controls, because the astral light, when manipulated by an impure will, turns against the operator and devours him. And here we reach the heart of Levi's message, a message perhaps more relevant today than ever. We live in an age of extreme materialism, where everything is reduced to what can be measured, quantified, and marketed. Do you also feel that the world has lost its connection to the sacred? That everything has become consumption, hurry, ego? I want to know, do you still feel mystery in life? Modern science, for all its astounding achievements, has lost touch with the spiritual dimensions of existence. Organized religion, in many cases, has become empty of true mystical experience, reduced to fossilized dogmas and lifeless rituals. And modern humanity, caught between a science that denies spirit and a religion that denies reason, finds itself fragmented, alienated, disconnected from itself, from nature, from the cosmos, and from the divine. Eliphas Levi offered a third way, high magic as a path that honors both intellect and spirit, reason and intuition, science and religion, a path that recognizes the universe not as a dead machine governed by blind laws, but as a living organism animated by conscious intelligence, permeated by a spiritual light that connects all things. A path that teaches the human being is not merely an evolutionary accident, a biological machine destined for annihilation, but a microcosm of the macrocosm, a divine spark incarnate, a magus in potential capable of consciously participating in the work of creation. This vision is revolutionary. It restores, too, the human being his dignity, his purpose, his power. But with that power comes responsibility. Levi's message is clear. Occult knowledge is not for the faint of heart, the morally corrupt, or those seeking easy shortcuts. It is for those willing to submit to the rigorous discipline of self-knowledge and self-transformation. It is for those who understand that the true treasure lies not in external phenomena, but in inner realization. It is for those ready to take responsibility for being conscious co-creators of their reality. When we look at Eliphas Levi's life, we see a journey that encapsulates this message. From the young seminarian full of doubts to the deacon in love, from the revolutionary socialist imprisoned multiple times to the unhappy husband in a broken marriage, from the father who lost all his children to the solitary teacher giving occult lessons in a modest Paris apartment. Every failure, every loss, every moment of despair was a step on the ladder of his initiation. Alphonse Louis Constant had to die so that Eliphas Levi could be born. And through that symbolic death and rebirth, he brought back from the realm of shadows a body of knowledge that was about to be lost forever. His works, written more than a century and a half ago, remain alive because they speak to eternal truths. Techniques may change, symbols may be reinterpreted, organizations may rise and fall, but the fundamental principles Levi articulated remain valid. The existence of the astral light, or whatever name we choose to give that subtle substance that mediates the interaction between consciousness and matter. The supremacy of trained and purified will. The correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm. The existence of a perennial philosophy. A wisdom tradition that transcends specific cultures and eras. The need for balance between opposites, for reconciliation between spirit and matter, masculine and feminine, light and darkness. The understanding that spiritual transformation is the true aim of all occult practices. And when we look at today's world, we see that Levi's vision is more necessary than ever. We live amid an ecological crisis caused by our disconnection from nature. We live amid a social crisis caused by materialism that reduces everything to merchandise. We live amid a spiritual crisis caused by the loss of meaning and purpose. The occultism that Levi helped revive is not an escape from reality, but a path to a deeper reality. In the end, the great arcane that Levi sought so intently wasn't a secret hidden in an ancient book, but something concealed within his own biography. The lesson that true initiation isn't about what you know, but about how much you are able to endure and transform. It's a reminder that we are more than physical bodies, that the universe is more than inert matter, that life has a purpose that transcends mere survival and reproduction. It's an invitation to reawaken that magical dimension of existence that modernity tried to suppress. Eliphas Levi taught that each of us is a potential magus, not in the sense of performing supernatural tricks, but in the sense of being conscious creators of our reality, skilled navigators of the currents of the astral light, architects of our own destiny. But to realize this potential, we need knowledge, we need practice, we need moral and spiritual discipline. We need to study correspondences, understand symbols, practice meditation and visualization, strengthen our will, purify our desires, expand our consciousness. This is the path Levi laid out for us. It's a difficult path because it demands that we confront our shadows, question our certainties, and let go of our comforting illusions. But it is also a path of liberation, of genuine empowerment, of connection with something greater than ourselves. And perhaps in the end, the greatest lesson we can learn from Eliphas Levi is this: it doesn't matter where you come from, how many times you've failed, or how dark the night you're walking through may be. Transformation is always possible. Rebirth is always an option. Initiation into the mysteries isn't the privilege of an elite born under a special star. It is the birthright of every human being who has the courage to seek truth and the willingness to pay the price of that quest. And perhaps in understanding this, you'll realize that this story isn't just about Levi. It's about you. Alphonse Louis, Constant, the shoemaker's son, the failed seminarian, the jailed revolutionary, the abandoned husband. The grieving father became Eliphas Levi, the magus of Paris, the master of Kabbalah and Tarot, the teacher of generations of occultists, the architect of a new spiritual synthesis that still illuminates the path for those who seek. His journey shows us that within each of us lies this potential for alchemical transformation, this power to transmute the lead of our failures and sufferings into the gold of wisdom and spiritual realization. May 31st, 1875. In a chair in Paris, unable to lie down due to pain, Eliphas Levi dies. But his death was only physical. Or perhaps Eliphas Levi never truly died. Perhaps he merely changed form. His ideas, his legacy, his vision of a spiritually awakened and magically empowered humanity, these remain alive, more relevant and needed today than at any other time, since he first articulated them in those revolutionary volumes that forever changed the course of Western occultism. Beyond the works cited in this video, Eliphas Levi also authored other equally fascinating and revealing books that further expand the understanding of his vision of magic, Kabbalah, and the mystery of existence. One of them is Le Livre des Splendeurs, the Book of Splendors, published posthumously in 1894. In it, Levi dives deep into the secrets of Kabbalah, especially the Zohar, exploring the divine light that permeates creation and the relationship between the Sephirot and the human spirit. It's a poetic meditation on the hidden splendor that sustains the cosmos, showing a mature, contemplative Levi, already turned toward the mystery of the final union between God and man. Another posthumous gem is Les Paradoxes de la Haute Science, The Paradoxes of High Science, published in 1921, collecting philosophical fragments, reflections, and aphorisms left in his notebooks. Levi discusses the apparent contradictions between faith and reason, spirit and matter, freedom and destiny, showing that true knowledge is born from the balance of opposites. He describes magic as a paradoxical science, because only paradox can express the totality of the real. There is also La Magie et la Divination, a collection of texts published posthumously, in which Levi examines ancient practices of divination from Greek oracles to tarot and astrology, and shows that, for the Magus, to foresee the future is not to read fate, but to understand the laws that shape it. En les mystères de la Kabbale, Jamatamatinet, unfinished manuscript, he explores the 10 Sephirot as stages of divine manifestation, and relates the Sefer Yetzirah to the 22 tarot cards, reinforcing the unity between Hebrew symbols and the major arcana. Lastly, there is Le Sorcier de Meudon, an allegorical essay in which Levi tells the story of a solitary mage seeking universal truth, a clear metaphor for his own spiritual journey. These works, many of them published after his death, complete the mosaic of his thought and reveal the most intimate, mystical dimension of one of history's greatest occultists, a man who never stopped seeking the light behind the veil of mystery. So did you like this video? Want a part 2? Comment with the phrase, "I want part 2 of this video," so I'll know you enjoyed it and I'll make a part 2. If you've made it this far, it means you liked our content, so don't forget to check our profile. There are lots of videos you'll love. We have videos on the biographies of Aleister Crowley, Helena Blavatsky, Pythagoras, and other masters. And feel free to leave your suggestion in the comments for upcoming videos. You'll save years of study in just a few minutes a day by watching our videos. Every video on this channel was produced based on over 20 years of study on these subjects. I guarantee you'll learn a lot with us. Drop a like below to support our work. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications to receive the next videos. I'm truly grateful to have you here with me on this journey. Now, click on one of the videos that will pop up on your screen. Every video on this channel was made to awaken your best self.